The headlines today: the Ethiopian government has been found moving bodies from massacre sites in western Tigray to destroy evidence. The humanitarian crisis in Tigray was felt all the way in Ottawa, Canada, and the clashes reported near Ethiopia and Kenya border have also come about too. As we move on to the main stories, the Ethiopian government is said to be moving bodies from massacre sites in western Tigray to destroy evidence. Globe News Net this morning tweeted as a breaking news that the government of Ethiopia is rushing to move bodies from massacre sites in western Tigray. According to the Globe News Net, the move is reportedly to destroy evidence after the Ethiopian government tried and failed to block the funding for the independent investigation. Thousands of ethnic Tigrayans are thought to have been massacred by Ethiopian and Eritrean soldiers and the Amhara forces as well. It is said to be remembered that last week, the Ethiopian government tried and failed to block funding for a UN-mandated international independent commission of experts to set up to probe humanitarian rights violations in the northern region of Ethiopia. Member of Tigray Armed Forces Central Command, Getachew Reda, said the news of Ethiopia's effort to defund the commissions of inquiry was overshadowed by the rather overhyped and long overdue passage of the aid trucks into the Tigray region. Getachew Reda stated both highlight is what is essentially at the heart of the problem. He says they both indicate the authority in Addis is hell-bent on carrying out a systematic campaign of genocide, siege, starvation against Tigrayans, while doing everything to evade responsibility for its crimes through smoke and mirrors. Getachew Reda added that the international community must say no to what he called these cheap tricks. Humanitarian crisis in Tigray is felt all the way in Ottawa, Canada. Yesterday, a rally took place in downtown Ottawa, Canada, to push the Canadian government to act now. The organizers are raising funds for medical kits for the millions of lives in crisis in Ethiopia's northernmost region, and CTV's report from the scene indicated that for Ottawa residents hailing from the region of Tigray, there's been a communication blackout for over a year now, as cell phone communication and internet have been completely disabled by the federal government. This means that the people don't even know if their loved ones are even alive.
They left us a message saying, please help us, we're starving. And imagine how painful it is to hear that and not being able to call them back.
It was a voice message that Azeb Gebrehiyot waited for months now, and confirmation that at least her nephew is in fact alive in Tigray.
Don't know if they're alive or dead, if they're starving to death. I think about my nieces, my nephews.
As I said, this voice message that Gebrehiyot has been waiting for months to hear confirmation that at least her nephew is in fact alive. And let's hear what she has to say.
When it comes to genocide, we should not be watching idly. The whole world should be rallying together to end a genocide.
She says her entire family is in the Tigray region, an area of the Ethiopian where a war has been underway for almost a year and a half now. The blockade imposed by the Ethiopian government on the region has prevented food and aid from reaching millions and millions of its civilians. It is the world's worst hunger crisis currently in over a decade. The UN estimates that 90% of the 6 million people in the region are in urgent need for humanitarian assistance. A convoy of food aid trucks finally entered the region on Friday. It was the first since mid-December from last year, and at that time, only trucks have been allowed into Tigray since the government's declaration of the humanitarian truce for unfettered access to humanitarian aid.
When it comes to genocide, we should not be watching idly. The whole world should be rallying together to end a genocide.
Dozens of protesters took to the streets in Ottawa Byward Market on Saturday to show their support and solidarity for Tigray.
We are trying to raise money to send 40 medical kits to Tigray. We've raised 20,000. We are planning to raise 20,000 more.
That was Eon Takee of United Tagaru Canada. As you heard, supporters are trying to put pressure on Canadian government to enforce sanctions and save the people from dying. Fabian Gabru, who lives in Ottawa and is an activist for the region, also had this to say.
It's one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world, but unfortunately, it's a crisis that much of the world doesn't even know about.
For Azib Gabrehiwet, the worry has not ended and it continues as agonizing as it may be. Let's take a listen.
Imagine the guilt and the shame that you feel being unable to help your family.
She's completely unable to send money to her family because there's no banking services currently in Tigray. She believes her nephew was able to get through to her in the voicemail because of help from the International Red Cross. Now she has to wait and hope to hear from them again. As we listen to the broadcaster, let's listen to what they had to say.
Organizers say that they are looking for support from the Canadian government and for help with fundraising for the medical kits. The efforts are being put together by United Tigray Canada.
In related development, Tigrayans in the diaspora have held similar demonstrations in various cities across the world over the weekend. Tigrayans in Kentucky, USA braved cold weather to demand action against the Ethiopian as well as the Eritrean leaders for their ongoing genocide on the people of Tigray.
I want to see this man at the ICC so bad. He deserves everything that's coming for him. I hope he knows that man. Like, this guy is absolutely terrible. What kind of a person invades another country? What kind of person? Isaias is the kind of person. What kind of person invites another man, another country to invade your own nation? Only Abiy Ahmed. Abiy to the ICC. Abiy to the ICC. Abiy to the ICC. Abiy to the ICC. I hope this man lives long enough to suffer pain. Suffer so much pain alone. Abiy is starving the people of Tigray. He's allowed race as a weapon of war. He continues to pretend like he's using humanitarian troops. Allow full access to humanitarian aid. All right, this is what we want. This is what we need.
The Tigrayan diaspora in Europe also gathered amid rain and snow in front of the UN office in Geneva last week and enacted the horrible suffering of Tigrayans under over 500 days of genocide and the siege starvation as it continues. Take a look at this enactment by the demonstrators of the actual burning of the Tigrayan civilians by the Ethiopian and Amhara security forces recently. Tigrayans living in other countries also held similar demonstrations. As we move on to the next story, the vigilante armed group by the name of Fano has taken responsibility for the 29th of March killings in Qorke, 15 kilometers from Metara on the Ethio-Djibouti railway. A new video that's circulating on social media shows one member of the armed making the disclosure to the applause of his fellows and armed fighters. Let's take a listen. We lost one member, but we killed and wounded over 100 from their side, including their commander. It is our force, Fano, from Shoa, that routed them in the areas all the way to Zamero. It had been reported that clashes between armed groups from Minjar Shankora Warada of North Showa Zone and the Amhara regional state, as well as the local militia in the bordering Fentale Warada, East Showa Zone of Oromia regional state, resulted in deaths of at least 26 civilians. Several local militias and members of the Oromia police, including the militia commander Abdisa Ifa, were also injured. The clashes were followed by statements from both Waradas, which were conflicting accounts of the incident. Observers said this latest video by the Fano armed group lays the controversy to rest. Our final update for today, clashes between armed men and their security forces have been reported in the southern Ethiopian town of Moyale, close to the border of Kenya. A local official told BBC that the clashes occurred between Saturday evening and Sunday morning. The official claimed the armed men were members of the Oromo Liberation Army, but did not disclose if there were any casualties. The incident, yet another indication of a rising insecurity in the southern and western part of the country. In Oromia specifically, the country's most populous region, clashes have continued to be reported between the government forces, which include the army and the regional police, as well as the OLA. On Saturday, a military official, Colonel Germa Ayala, said security forces were taking decisive measures against the OLA in what he called a coordinated operation. The OLA, on their best part, said they are winning all their battles. Oda Taribi, a spokesperson for the group, claimed in a tweet on Monday that the government forces sustained heavy casualties in a place called Malka Lami in southern Oromia region, and there are concerns that the instability in multiple places could exacerbate the humanitarian crisis across the entire country. And according to the UN, a combination of drought, conflicts, and disease outbreaks could also result in more than 20 million Ethiopians requiring humanitarian assistance within this year alone. That concludes our news for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Bye-bye.